Hello everyone, it's Mike again, and with this video I'll be going over some gameplay for the BT16 version of DigiPolice. And I really like the new line just because it provides you some really good tools to get some DP buffs on your other bodies, along with the new tank Dramon being really solid to help set up for future plays with your megas, at least Brigade Dramon. And in this case I end up going first and I end up going Ryuda and playing the Satsuki. Since in this case I am playing Dark Knightmon, he kind of wants to have bodies on board, with his Magnetamon and just to have blockers in general. So having the Satsuki out early on really helps me gain memory, and the fact that if I'm able to at least kind of get jammy, if I'm able to actually hit his stuff, is still really useful. And even if I'm unable to use the Star main phase with Ryudamon, his inhibitor, it's still pretty good because since Dark Knightmon is a blocker deck, I'm able to suspend down the blockers so that way I can hopefully hit directly a lot easier. But in this case I'm only really able to suspend one of his guys, but it's not the biggest deal because my main issue was the Skull Knightmon because I think my guy was equal TP, but since I suspended because we were equal play cost, I'm able to hit directly because he doesn't block with his Magnetamon, because I'm pretty sure he just wanted it on board so that way he can have another blocker for later. But even then he could just want to use it to swing and get some holy damage. And I'm pretty sure I didn't have a level 5 in hand, so that's why I ended up just doing training along with all slamming the BT14 Command Dramon, and I ended up getting Tank Dramon. It's still useful to put in the deck, at least I have one copy, just because I'm able to kind of play out more bodies if I have the chance. And I also do like Kyokomon just because since if you pair it up with the Ryudamon line, it basically guarantees you a draw no matter what, especially if you also have reboot from the Tamers. And I think Gomamon is especially helpful in this matchup just because it gets rid of inheribles, which again you really need it in this deck just because you're able to suspend and get protection and whatnot. But in this case it doesn't really matter that he stripped my Ryudamon because he ends up just swinging into my guy regardless. But Blue Blaze kind of does help in some situations, only because again it allows you access to use Gomamon along with Missymon to get extra draws, since you do want to spam board with Dark Knightmon. And in this case, he kind of just ends up again clearing my board because he just crosses into Dark Knightmon, giving me 1 memory. And while I do gain 1 with Satsuki, again that still leaves me with very little resources to kind of mess around with. But it's not the biggest deal because I end up just evoing to level 4 and grabbing another Ryudamon with my defense training. And I'm pretty sure I didn't have another rookie, so that's kind of why I grabbed a Ryudamon, just in case I can just hard slam it for cheap and just go off there. And he ends up swinging, and it's very unfortunate because it ends up having my memory setter, and this one gives Alliance, which is still insanely good to help me kind of get back in the game to get extra checks. And since the deck does go wide, it's extremely useful in that case. And in this case I'm trying to just deal with this Dark Knightmon for various reasons. One of them being I don't want to trigger its when it would be removed effect, along with dealing with a potential ace. So in this case I end up swinging directly, and I end up going to my Oyumon thanks to Sayamon's effect, so that way I can bomb deck it so I avoid 2 problems at once, while also basically checking for 2 damage. And in this case it kind of just goes through, and he ends up hitting another Nene, which is really good for him because again he gets another Surge. But again I kind of feel he probably should have blocked here early, because that way now he's only down to 2 security. And again for him it's not really looking good, because now if he doesn't deal with this board he is in some really deep trouble. And while it's 2 bodies, Oyumon being a really solid card just because it has blocker, and that way I'm able to get more free bodies if he doesn't get rid of it. In this case I end up going to Numamon kind of just to have a champion on board, along with Hall Slamming the new Steel's Dramon to kind of put more pressure on him, because now I have 3 bodies so he's in lethal. Along with that, if he wants to de-digivolve it, he still has to get rid of all bodies, because while he could de-digivolve the Oyumon, he still has to delete one of them, and he has to do a lot more work just to get rid of every single body on board right now. So I think my board is looking pretty strong in comparison to his, because again he doesn't really have a lot of memory gain in this situation other than deleting his own Nenes. And while I only have 1 blocker on board, again the fact that Oyumon's all tones effect kind of stops him from stringing with his smaller bodies, so then this way he kind of has to deal with it first before he starts using the Magnetamon for actual damage. And I did end up keeping my Tamer under, mainly because I wanted to get the reboot effect, so in that way I'm able to again trigger the blocker and be able to put him in this position right now to kind of take things a little bit more slowly and kind of think of how he wants to remove the Mega. He brings the Gasmon up, which is able to kind of combo off with his Deadly Axemon play because he's able to return a cross material, which is really good just because if he has another Dark Knightmon, he can just use that to remove my board, which I think he doesn't really have one at the moment because now he ends up swinging with it to hopefully trigger the Missymon effect. And in this case, I end up blocking because if he ends up Digi-evolving my Oyumon, at least I get to have a block in, and I'm able to play out another Ryudamon, which is good for me because now I'm able again to have more board presence. And in this case, he ends up Death Xing my board, which isn't the worst thing because now I still get my ultimate, and while it kind of does suck that again I just got board wiped, I can kind of rebuild because again now I still have a ton of memory to play out smaller bodies. And since I'm at 6 memory, I'm able to do quite a bit of stuff, and in this case I end up playing the Commandramon to search out pieces, and I do realize I have a Vike Ace there, so I end up top decking it, so in that way I'm able to draw it eventually at some point. And again, I don't think I had one in hand, so that's why again I put it on top. And in this case, I end up just going Mind Linking to go into a Ginrumon to kind of suspend down one of his bodies because I do need the Tamer to activate the second effect, and I end up just suspending the Monitamon, so that way I'm able to get rid of at least one blocker in this case. And here I end up just going into my Begadramon for free just because of the fact that Soyumon works with Beast Dragon and DigiPolice. And since Begadramon is an up 2 effect, I'm able to just pretty much delete his Deadly Axemon to get rid of another blocker, which is really good because now I'm able to kind of alliance and directly just put him down to 2 security. And since it doesn't die here, that's really good for me because now I get to keep Begadra on board. And with his end of turn, I'm pretty much able to play on more bodies, which is really helpful for me because I'm able to at least hopefully keep other stuff on board. And I finally evo into the Kalgadramon. I ended up having Oleo because I just want to get as many bodies as I wanted on board just in case if one of my other stacks died. And thanks to Begadramon, I end up just playing out another guy, but it doesn't really matter just because of Death X is able to kind of kill it. And in this case, I feel like I'm also kind of overextending my stuff just because I'm just free playing a lot of bodies, but for me it's not the biggest deal just because that way I'm able to again have a wide board just in case it makes him harder for him to come back, because now I just have a lot of blockers, and while the Death X is able to kill off my lowest body, again he pretty much just ended up killing a rookie, and now I pretty much just have a Mega, an Ultimate, and 2 champions, which again for him it's harder to deal with, and I don't really think there's anything he could do in this situation to really come back, because while he could cross into a Dark Knightmon and give a decent blocker that floats, again there just isn't much he can do just because of the sheer amount of bodies I have on board on the current moment. But he doesn't have the memory to really set up a lot of blockers, so in this case, he just evolves into the Star Deck Magna and kind of just bounces one guy, but it's not the biggest deal because again, I have more bodies and he doesn't really have any sort of counterplay. And the next game is going to be facing my friend's Money deck. I think these decks are kind of similar in the way where they can kind of spam out a lot of bodies, but the key difference is in the case of DigiPolice, I'm able to also get a lot of blockers, which really makes it annoying for him, so in that way if I block with one of my smaller guys, he kinda can't get his alliance checks in. While for me it might have the slight advantage just because I have easier access to the Digivolve, I feel if I overextend my board, you can kind of punish it with the Lex of Heaven's Judgment to kind of wipe it out, and in that case all my effort was put to nothing just because again I would have to spend a lot more time rebuilding in that case just because Alliance can get a decent amount of colors, and I think it's actually really easy for it to do so, especially now just because you have so many colors that being black, purple, and whatever else. And in this case, I kind of do a similar play to what I did in game 1 where I end up going into a rookie and I play a Satsuki, and I didn't have the Ryudamon in hand, but I don't think it really matters as much just because again, any rookie is fine by me. And staying in the back for the Alliance deck is still really good because you don't want to push out and start dealing damage just in case if the opponent can kind of respond to the amount of bodies, since this deck also likes to play a lot of other small stuff. And in this case I end up using the really long option to grab Hysteriumon, so that way again I could also use it to get an unsuspend, and then if he has one of his suspended guys I'm able again to bomb deck it with Oyumon if I do end up having it. But even then it's still a really solid card just to be able to go into basically any of my megas for free other than my Bike 1 Ace. But it's not the biggest deal because again the fact that they are pretty much full cost, which again sucks really heavily, but that way I can use that to alleviate it. And in this case, he ends up just, getting some more soldiers out along with playing my Tamer because he really needs his pieces right now because I don't think he has a whole lot of stuff he can free play. And again, I don't promote yet just because I kind of want to build up my resources, and I end up just hard slamming the BT14 Commandramon because again, I don't really have much else I can do without overextending my board. And I think both megas, at least in archetype, can kind of deal with Alliance pretty well because I can delete a lot of his other smaller bodies along with, spamming out others if it's Brigadramon, or I can kind of bomb deck it, anything that I want with Oyumon if it's suspended. But again, since he's most likely going to be suspended anyways for his Alliance stuff, that's not the worst thing in my case. While he ends up deleting the Commandramon I had on board, it's not the worst thing because again, it's only one rookie and I do have a stack in the back and enough memory on my turn to kind of just, again, replay another rookie if I really wanted to in the end. And then Chewymon ends up living, which kind of wasn't unexpected just because he had enough DP to kind of just survive all the hits. And Mimi is still always a solid choice in any green deck just because, in this case, if his board gets wiped out, since he does have to commit a lot on board, he's able to at least somewhat bounce back just because, again, just having something in raising can alleviate some of the issues you'd have normally. In this case, he also ends up evoing into his Chewymon X to end up free playing a body, which again, the more pressure he puts on me, the worse it is because now not only do I have to deal with a Mega, I also have to deal with the fact that he also played a Lusamon, which now makes it harder for me to kill. And again, the more bodies he has on board, the more easier it is for him to kill me just because now he can have alliance with whoever he wants, and in this case, he's able to alliance with his Lusamon next turn if I don't remove it, and that gives him an insane buff for the turn because pretty much nothing in my deck can kill it. In this case, I end up cracking the option and I'm able to free play anything. In this case, I just free play the Commandramon to get an extra Surge. Again, this is just really good cycle for the deck just because I'm able to get more bodies along with potentially gain more Surges. And in this case, I end up just building up into a second stack with the help of my training because that way I'm able to go into the Sealdramons for free. And while he doesn't really have any blockers in this case, and while I'm able to gain rush of it, I don't think I end up swinging with it. I just really wanted to build up a second stack so that way I can also alliance for really big numbers, along with, in this case, I end up going into the new Tankdamon to kind of, deal with some of his smaller bodies at the same time while having another really big body and another ultimate to potentially set up for an ace play later down the road. And with this next play, I pretty much am able to easily remove his Chewymon X, so then that way he kind of has to build up into another Mega. And while it does get bomb deck, again, I don't really care that much just because that way he kind of has to just have another one in hand. And in this case, I end up alliancing for, I believe, about 19k. And the only thing I really had to worry about, again, is just Heavens, because it could basically kill me at the end of attack. And I end up putting Satsuki under my Tankdramon just because I can give it reboot, so that way he can't swing over it. And then that way I can kind of just safely blast evo, because if he does swing into it, he might be able to kill it with, just the sheer amount of DP you could get, especially with Lusamon. While he does have to rebuild into another Mega, it's not the worst thing just because he ended up using Nini last turn to kind of help him get a champion in the back. And the dual tamer is really effective here because he at least gets to reduce his evolution cost by 1, so he's able to at least go into his ultimate for 2, so that way he can kind of be more memory efficient, which is really good. And in this case, he ends up going into the Antilamon. I'm pretty sure that's the purple one that lets you grab stuff from trash at the end of attack, which again, he kind of wants to have as many of his small bodies in hand as possible. And in this case, he ends up alliancing, and even if I do Vikemon Ace him here, it wouldn't be enough to kind of block it, because I'm pretty sure he ends up being 1k extra in comparison to my Oyumon, which again kind of sucks to me because I kind of want to block the hit so then that way he doesn't reduce my security to 1. But it is what it is. I kind of just wish I had more DP buffs in the likes of something like the other Commandramon from the new line and just other stuff like that. And the Star Deck Truby is still really effective just because, again, not only can you alliance it, evo it for cheaper, you still get to play a body. And in this case, I do end up deciding to, DTG evolve it by going to Vikemon Ace. And I mostly just asked him how big his level 4 would be. And again, this is where I said that it ended up being 1k extra just because of the DP gain from Lusamon. and I really didn't want to block the hit, so again I just ended up taking it, and now I'm just down to 1 security, which is kind of unfortunate, but he doesn't have game here just because none of his bodies have rush, so I'm able to at least kind of deal with it next turn. And even if they did have rush, Vikemon kind of did end up stunning them, so he would have to evo numerous times, but of course he couldn't just because he didn't really have the memory to do so. In this case, again, he just puts me to 2 with his training, and it's very unfortunate he bomb decks next antibody, but again, he ended up getting a boost, so that's still good in his end. I end up unmindlinking them both from the Digimon, and I think it does kind of suck that, of course, that Vikemon's not a Digipolice, so he doesn't get any of the inherits from, like, say, Satsuki and whatnot, but his when attacking is still really good just because I'm able to kind of get rid of smaller bodies, and since he basically has a lot of stuff that has, like, 1 or less source, that's really good for me if I decide to attack with it. And I didn't really alliance with the Vikemon here because I want to use it just in case if I had to, because it's when attacking, as I mentioned before. So in this case, I end up playing out a Numemon to put Satsuki under it, but I don't use the Numemon to swing, as I just alliance with it and I unsuspend. And since his Altones kicked in, I'm also able to play out another Digimon. And in this case, it ended up being the new Sealsdramon as well. But of course, since he doesn't have any blockers, both my checks end up going through. And again, that's really good for me just because now I pretty much have lethal on board just because I have 3 bodies that can actually swing. And in this case, I don't end up alliancing because in my mind, it didn't really matter just because I have the Sealsdramon as a backup to swing, because Hero ends up dying. But again, I don't really care just because I have, Sealsdramon and Vikemon to finish game for me. And again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been watching my videos and staying to the end. I really do appreciate it, and I really wish you guys would like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with my future gameplay videos. Again, thank you all for watching, and see you guys later.